We're in our satellite studios today for another episode of Cult Pop, and I'm very happy to have with me Carl Lundgren, just a fabulous artist that was on our show maybe going back 5 years ago now, maybe 4 years ago, and just got a wonderful response to his appearance, and I wanted to have Carl on and wanted to have him on. I see him at all the different shows and events throughout the year. He's at every convention that means anything, Carl's there. And when I convention locally in Michigan here and around the Midwest, and I'm always telling Carl how much I want to have him on the show. We've been fortunate enough to have Carl back on now. Carl, thanks so much for being on the show today. And for those who are new to Carl Lundgren is an amazing rock artist, rock posters, fantasy artist, science fiction artist, contemporary artist. The guy is just absolutely amazing. Throughout the show, we're going to be showing you images of some of his great art. But I want to jump right into his wonderful new book, Rock Posters of the Psychedelic Era. It is just absolutely amazing, page after page of fantastic rock art. And Carl, tell us about the book and the wonderful era that it represents.
Well, thanks for having me on today, Jim, and I really enjoy doing this. You mentioned conventions, and Detroit now has 2 comic book conventions, and I'm also involved in that as well, having co-chaired the very first convention ever held in 1965 here in Detroit. Wow. So I go back a long time, and I've been dabbling in a lot of different fields. But the rock posters came back to haunt me in the mid-90s. I'd done them in the 60s, kind of forgot about them for 30 years, and then people started asking me, where do you have any rock posters? And I didn't own any, but I knew collectors that had them, and I borrowed them back and scanned them and started making copies, and one thing led to another, and that seems to be all I'm doing now is these rock and roll posters. So they're very popular because they're kind of historic and they're artistic.
Well, they're amazing because they take you back to a time when true music lovers just can go through and see all these amazing Steve Miller Band, MC5, Led Zeppelin, just everything you could ever imagine you've done. And some of them are just original sketches or paintings of yours. But something I've always been wanting to talk about is some of the in-depth stuff that goes into some of these, where there's multiple pictures, multiple layers of art, if you will. I don't know. Talk to me about the process of some of these and some of your favorites, and we'll show them.
They used to be really labor-intensive, very complicated. Most of these were done in the darkroom, which is a place where film is developed, and I was able to put pieces together. I would draw lettering by hand, lay it out. And we didn't have any way of sizing stuff back then, changing the size of images. So there was a thing called a photostat machine, which was kind of prehistoric, basically. And very, very complicated process of making the negatives and then the plates and then running the printing presses. And now everything's done digitally, and I can actually work on them on Photoshop, which is a fantastic magic tool for somebody who learned how to do it the hard way. You can imagine,
I'm going to bring up some of the pictures as I look at them and then ask you for your thoughts on them. We'll talk about the 60s posters and then some newer ones you've done. But looking at one that's an iconic that everybody would love, the Beatles at Olympia Stadium. My God, August 13th.
Now, that's a tribute poster. There really were no posters back in 1966.
So you create this later as a tribute?
Yeah, as just something I can make and give people an idea of what it was like back then. I was actually at the concert. I was outside the building looking for the Beatles limousine, and I never saw them arrive. I guess I didn't have the $5 to get in, so... But a lot of people react to the price of the concerts. But the bands were close up in those days. They weren't all held at Olympia or anything like that. A lot of them were at small teen clubs. There's 120 teen clubs in the Detroit area. Some of them only lasted one weekend. But a lot of them featured all the local bands, and some of them featured huge big-name bands. For instance, the Fifth Dimension in Ann Arbor had Jimi Hendrix, Cream, and The Who all played there for the very first time in Michigan.
Wow.
Before they played anywhere else. So the bands that you think were huge, like Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd, back then you could just be there. And they had a Led Zeppelin concert on Sunday at the Grandy Ballroom. 35 people showed up in the audience. Nobody knew who they were. So you could be part of the band basically right up at the stage, and you didn't have to worry about, balcony seating in the back.
Now, talk about the Grandy Ballroom. Carl, one of the favorites I bought from you is the Janis Joplin that you did with the Grandy Ballroom, because I bought 3 or 4 of those for different friends and family because it's an iconic look and it's an iconic place. But the Grandy Ballroom, whenever I mention that locally, it was a little bit before my time. I never saw a show there, but so many people that I talk to just ask, oh my God, the Grandy Ballroom. And then they'll have 2, 3, 4 stories about what great nights they had at the Grandy Ballroom. Talk about that and what a joy it was to work on posters for a place like that, and how much joy it brings people when they see these.
Well, you mentioned Janis Joplin. She's very near and dear to my heart. I met her twice, actually. But there was a lot of different bands that I would see over and over, and just took my breath away, the idea that I could see these bands all over.
How did you get involved in the whole business of representing these places with the poster?
Well, it was actually by accident. I when I was a kid, I used to go to the Mouse House. It was a store run by Stanley Miller's mother. Stanley Miller was known as Mouse, and he actually airbrushed T-shirts at the State Fair and was well known locally as a local artist. And just by happenstance, as I was going to college in LA, I stopped in San Francisco and saw his posters. He had moved out to California, and he had started doing these rock posters in the early 60s. And I was blown away by the art. So about a year or so later, I came back to Detroit and found out that there was a place called the Grandy Ballroom where the same thing was being done. Posters were being made and bands were playing. So I contacted the guy who in charge, his name was Gary Grimshaw, and asked him if I could do a poster. I did some sample posters that looked like, I knew what I was doing. And he gave me a job eventually, and I started doing them regularly. And then there was a time when he was in trouble with the law, so he had to lay low, and I ended up doing a whole bunch of Grandy posters.
So you picked up the slack.
Yeah.
I'm curious, in going through the book, I kind of get some idea, but the years, you say it was the 60s. I thought it went into the 70s. It was just the 60s or into the 70s that you were doing
basically, it was 66 to 72.
Okay.
The Grandy kind of died in the early 70s. Other people took it over and tried to make a go of it, and Russ Gibb no longer was involved, but it did die, shortly thereafter. The building is still there on Grand River. It's a tragedy because it's all boarded up and falling apart, and people have broken in to steal
stuff,
pieces of it.
What I'd like to do now, if it's cool with you, is kind of talk about, I'll bring up a poster and then you talk about it, and then you tell me some of your favorite posters, and the folks at home will see that while we're discussing the poster. I want to start off with just the Grandy Ballroom. This is something I think you did kind of as an honor to it. It's Grandy Ballroom, Rock and Roll 66 to 72, and then it lists all the types of bands. This is an example of something you've done as a tribute in later years now.
Oh, absolutely. I thought there should be something, and I went and painted a picture of the Grandy and got a complete list of all of the larger name bands. It's not every band that ever played there, but it's all of the more important ones, local and the ones from England and San Francisco.
And this, when you do this now, these are some of your best sellers because
people love it. You were talking about people, having stories, but you can't imagine what it's like for me out on the street when I see 10 or 20,000 people in a weekend, and every third person has something to say about it. A lot of people call it the Grand Ballroom. They don't know how to pronounce it. But a lot of them also, and a lot of them have misinformation about it too. But like a lot of people think that Hendrix played there or the Doors, and neither of them did.
Okay.
So, things like that. So.
MC5. You have an MC5 poster that I think you have a couple different variations of the MC5 poster, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And MC5, I'm really amazed at. Once again, it's a band before my time, but then I really got into them, and they kind of had a resurgence, if you will, where people realized what an incredible band they were when I was coming up in the late 80s and 90s, and now to this day they still have a big following. And MC5, talk a little bit about them, and we'll kind of look at their poster and what you thought
the
about
MC5, they never really had a hit, but they had a lot of energy. and colorful costumes, and they played everywhere all the time. They never stopped playing, and you know, they never gave up. And I think people respect that, the fact that they really tried hard to be successful. But like other bands, they eventually broke up and stuff. But I actually lived with members of the MC5 back in,
Oh, wow.
you know, but when they were in Detroit, before they all moved to Ann Arbor.
Wow, I'm a big fan of the MC5. Their music is still relevant today. Still cool.
Yeah.
It's
They were
jamming music
considered
today.
one of the first punk bands. They started that movement, them and the Psychedelic Stooges, which turned into Iggy Pop and the Stooges.
Now, I want to talk to you about some of your originals going back. This Steve Miller Band. Is this goes back as an original, and you're drawing?
Yeah, it's a hand
that?
drawing. I was influenced by the not the Pre-Raphaelite so much as the Art Nouveau movement. Every time I did a poster, I tried to make it unique and different, a different style. I got really bored with one style really fast, so I approached a lot of things that I liked, a lot of illustration and comics and things like that for inspiration. So a lot of it is based on my interpretation of what I liked, my taste.
This book is so amazing, Carl, because you can thumb through, see some of your favorite artists, and be taken back to a time. But I always come back to this damn Janis Joplin poster, and it's really your more subtle, low-key posters, but I just absolutely love that. And she's another we discussed, and you said she's one of your favorites, but I just think that is so cool that you were able to represent her and capture a moment in time with Janis Joplin.
I keep thinking about more and more about how unique it is. I mean, anybody can take a photo, but to put it into a piece of art and advertise a show that people can relate to, it makes it even more interesting, I think.
Now, not to put you on the spot, but let's talk about some of your favorites. And again, people will be able to look at these while you discuss them. People at home will see, what are some of your all-time favorites? Not bestsellers, because I'll ask you that later. What are some of your all-time favorites? And maybe some that don't get as much recognition, but you really think are amazing.
Well, the number one is obviously is Vanessa. That's the one that most people think is one of the 10 greatest rock posters ever made. It's iconic. It's a huge seller. I was fortunate enough to sign a bunch of them out in California. They're worth over $10,000 a piece. They're very hard to find.
And you don't own any of them now, do you?
No. I sold a whole stack of them, though, back in the mid-'80s, though, for $400.
Oh, wow.
And like I say, $10,000 is what they go for, depending on the condition, of course.
Right.
But that one is, I can't think about anything else but that one, because that was my very first poster that I did as in poster format. A lot of these were not done as posters; they were done as postcards, small editions. They weren't printed big size.
And these are the things that for people that may not be watching this, because this was also kind of popular now, they'd staple them on the telephone poles, plaster them on the walls and stuff like that, so they'd be printed up by
them, and they're erect.
And people wouldn't think about keeping them.
Oh no, why would they? It's advertising. You wouldn't keep a cigarette ad from the 60s.
Right.
Why would you keep a rock poster? But some people did. A lot of people, I've heard 100 stories about how the kid went away to college and his mom threw away his collection of posters that he had under the bed, and knowing that how much they're worth now as far as collectors' prices go. So
now, talking again about some of the tribute posters you do, the Jimi Hendrix Experience with Soft Machine, MC5, and Rationals, that's a tribute poster.
Yeah,
correct?
That's a real show. I think Gary Grimshaw did the actual poster for it, but I did my own version because I'm not Gary.
Oh, Deep Purple. Wow, so many cool ones. When I see you at the shows, we'll try to catch up, and then I say, okay, let me excuse you because business will come in, and no matter if it's a comic book convention, if it's an art show, some type of thing, you always have a busy life. Like, you're one of the few artists that can say you always have people coming in, talking, buying something, coming in. I just saw you the other day at an art event, and people coming in, talking, buying. What seems to be some of the more popular ones to be purchased now? Currently, what are some of the favorites?
Well, the best ones are not necessary. A lot of the big name bands, a lot of people that have transcended, time, like Stevie Ray Vaughan, for instance, tragically died iconic guitar player. The Doors, as you're looking at there.
Yeah, that's
that's
amazing.
the ones that most people know, Hendrix, the things that people remember. But there's a wider audience of people that remember the smaller name bands like Quicksilver, Messenger Service, and bands like that. And I'm just as happy with those posters as I am with the others. So.
Now, some organizations today are fortunate enough to have you do, I noticed that you'll help sponsor or do a poster for a particular event, maybe here in Michigan once in a while. You still
once
do
in
some
a while, I do 2 or 3 a week.
Yeah, well, but yeah.
Easily do 2 or 3 a week.
Yeah.
For everything. Benefits, small concerts, art shows I'm in, friends, people who just want a poster. I've done posters for bar mitzvahs. I've done posters, for all kinds of different things, and a lot of people are interested in that.
And you've got a website so people can contact you and and kind of request stuff like that. I kind of meant when I'm talking about posters, I mean big event posters that I'll see. Oh God, I know there's Carl's work. There's Carl's work. I think that's just so amazing to know you and have you.
Small.
Now, something I'd like to hit on because fans of cult pop are obviously big fans of the genre stuff, and you had such an incredible presence in. It was funny as I knew you as a science fiction fantasy artist before I knew about the rock stuff. And I had many science fiction and fantasy book covers that you would do. And when you go to these comic book conventions and you make appearances there, you have all kinds of prints and originals that you do for people. You've got iconic stuff like the Frankenstein painting that I just absolutely adore, that damn Frankenstein painting of yours. And you have so many wonderful dragons and dungeons and all kinds of stuff that you've done over the years. So it's kind of neat that you have a completely separate life, almost, if you will, as an artist with that type of stuff.
You're right. That's exactly what I started out to do. I was inspired as a child by an artist named Frank Frazetta, and he did covers for books. So I immediately thought, well, if I want to be like him, I've got to do covers for books. So it took me 9 years to break into this illustration business in New York, and I eventually did covers for books for almost 13 years, 200 or 300 of them. I won awards and so forth, but finally realized that I liked the paintings and I didn't actually have to do covers of books. It was the paintings that I liked. So it took me all that time to realize it. And then I started doing fine art, which were ideas of my own that weren't inspired by somebody's novel. And I started doing that in the mid-'80s, and that turned into a whole nother career of being on the road doing shows at Renaissance festivals and all kinds of street art fairs and galleries and museums.
It's amazing when you have a whole giant display area. It's not just a small little table or something like that, and you have so much room dedicated to the rock art, and then so much room dedicated to the fantasy and the different stuff. And it's amazing. You could spend an hour easily if you're a longtime fan or somebody new. You could spend more than an hour going through all your art. You have so much amazing stuff.
Yeah, to me, it's a burden.
Yeah.
That's a big parasite that's on my back that I have to carry around and be responsible for all
that
my whole
stuff.
life. Yeah,
Sure.
And some of it I'm not too happy with, of course, but still people see it. So I have to accept the fact that that's what I do, and I've never done anything else since I was a teenager. So basically, it's a life. I mean, it's a great life for me because I don't have to work for anyone.
Right, and
I'm
there's
basically my own boss.
There's not many artists that can say they've made their living through their life being an artist, so that's incredible. I'm a proud owner of 2 of your originals, which we'll show through. We showed at one point in the show, and I know that you do originals for people, and people will be able to go to your website. We've had that up throughout, and you are not opposed to somebody contacting you and doing original works, correct?
No, I do commissions and all kinds of things for everyone, but like getting back to saying how difficult it is to be an artist, it's something I do all the time, and it's still difficult for me. I mean, the scariest thing in the world is to sit down in front of a blank board and create something that's as good as or better than the last thing I did. You think it would be easy, but it can't be repetitive. It has to be original. And to think of an original thing, I'm getting better at it, but it's still very difficult to do it. Just like a lot of the posters that I do are duds. And nobody's interested in certain ones that I've done. I see that instantly. Nobody even picks it up when it's in my bin. But
now, what are some of your favorite iconic? Because I want people to be able to see these as we discuss. and I want to be hitting on the ones that you like. And when you go to your website, there's certain ones I've said I just adore that Frankenstein painting of yours, that original, because it's such a unique, cool take, and we'll see that now. And the fact that Frankenstein is sitting reading a book is just one of the most amazing, cool interpretations and takes on that character.
Yeah, thanks. Ideas are important. If you can communicate an interesting idea to someone, that makes it all the better. But art is subjective. It means that everybody has a different opinion of what is art, what is good, what they like. And there's really no such thing as good art or bad art. It's just what you like. And some is more popular, some is promoted better, some is, the critics will say it's better, so people will believe it. Or it eventually gets old, old-fashioned, or, eventually comes back into vogue. So basically, art is just what you do and how you do it, I guess.
Well, Carl, I'd be remiss reminding people as we talk, we're talking about rock posters in the psychedelic era. That's Carl's new book in its second printing, I believe.
That's the second printing, and it's been picked up by a big publisher in Pennsylvania now, and it's going to be in hardcover next year, and 3,000 to 5,000 copies.
Fantastic.
They're going to pre-sell.
And people will be able to learn about that by going to our website. They'll be able to link up to yours. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I know you have some copies left of your wonderful fine art book. You have a couple of different books we saw at the...
Yeah, actually, those are all gone.
Are they all gone now?
Yeah, but I'm working on a fourth book right now,
Okay.
which is a compilation of the posters as well as the fine art. It's my whole life, with a lot of stories about the people I met, everybody from R. Crumb to Stephen King to science fiction writers that you probably heard of. And I have had a real interesting life. I lived in 6 different states and I moved 23 times.
Wow.
So I had a lot of experiences all along the way, which I really want to share. I'm not a good writer, but I do have stories.
Stories to tell.
So somebody can polish them up, I guess.
Well, Carl, we're just about wrapping up here, and you know that I'm going to have all the stuff we've talked about will be appearing through the show. Your website will be linked up at our website at Cult Pop, but tell the folks at home who are watching on Comcast or any of the other cable networks about your website and how to find you.
Well, I've had my website for over 20 years, and it's called carllundgren.com or detroitrockposters.com. Basically, that's how you can find it. I'm the easiest person in the world to find. So. And
the amazing thing about that website, you can order any type of poster from there, all types of stuff, and you can be contacted once again in regards to, because I know there's art fans out there that would say, wow, I would love to get an original. I've got some money, I'd like to get something done. And you're more than open to that type of stuff and can be contacted through the website for that type of stuff.
Yeah,
also.
I love to get emails, but I hate to get phone calls. I might be driving.
Okay.
So I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, Carl, I absolutely am a huge fan of your work. You know I absolutely adore it. I'm always buying posters and bringing people over to buy your posters. I am so thankful that I am fortunate enough to have a couple of your pieces. I think you are just an amazing artist, and I am just pleased to have you at our fine studio today, and I'm pleased that you are on Cult Pop.
Thanks, Jim. I'm learning. Appreciate it.
Well, that was another edition of Cult Pop, folks. Stay tuned for a little announcement, and then we'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. I wanted to let everybody know about some cool news in regards to Cult Pop. You know, we've had the website going on 8 years now, but we decided to add a Facebook page because of the popularity of Facebook. And basically what we're going to do with the Facebook page is just keep you informed of anything going on with Cult Pop, past, present, and future. So in other words, if a past guest has a book out, I'm going to let you know that they have a book out. If we've got some goings on currently with new guests or whatever, we'll try to keep you informed of that. And we'll try to let you know what we've got coming up in the future. So just go to Facebook if you're already there. Please like us, and then you can subscribe and get all the information. And I think it'll be real helpful because I do get a lot of questions about when are you going to have this person on again? When are you going to have this author, this artist, this actor? Well, if I can't have them on immediately or in the near future, this is a good way to at least keep up with the goings on of that person, what they may have new out or whatever. So, and as always, I would like you to go to our website, cultpop.com. You can watch every episode we've ever done and also link up directly to the people you're interested in through the website. So as always, I thank you for watching Cult Pop today, and we look forward to having you watch us again.